This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia.
Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by Italian Citizenship Assistance.com. Of course, we are back here again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. Welcome back. How you doing, man?
Thank you. Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And thank you so much again for making yourself available to talk about Italian citizenship. And today, we wanted to talk a little bit more about Italian citizenship by descent versus Italian citizenship through marriage, because there are a lot of people who are eligible, in fact, for both. But which is the right choice to make if you have both of those options available to you? So Marco, I know you get contacted about this frequently. What would you say to somebody who would present this information, or even maybe through doing a discovery call and finding the information about this person, if you were to discover this information that they actually could be eligible both ways, what would be your recommendations, or what would you start talking with them about?
A lot of people do get in contact with me, couples, and normally one of them is interested in applying for Italian citizenship by descent. They have Italian ancestry, they have a very clear understanding of the rules, they did the research, and they qualify for citizenship by descent. But then they tell me, okay, when I become an Italian citizen with my kids, my spouse will be applying for Italian citizenship through marriage. But then they tell me, you know what, my spouse is also of Italian descent, but maybe, they didn't do the research. They don't have a lot of information on their spouse's Italian line. So they just go straight to the citizenship through marriage for their spouse. But normally what I tell them is it's worth looking into whether your spouse also qualifies for Italian citizenship, because what I tell people is it is, in my opinion, much easier and better from a lot of perspectives to apply for citizenship by descent for both spouses if they both qualify. And maybe we can get into the reasons.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my next question. If this path for citizenship through marriage is so possible for a person, why would they want to go through the process of gathering all the documents and so on to get Italian citizenship by descent?
I believe the first obstacle for people applying for citizenship through marriage is the language, because there is a language requirement for people who want to start the citizenship through marriage process, which the language requirement is not required for those people who want to apply for citizenship by descent. So if you plan on having your spouse apply for citizenship through marriage after you have become an Italian citizen by descent, then you should consider that he or she is going to have to learn Italian. And we did speak about that, I believe, in a couple of episodes, that the level required is B1, so lower intermediate. So you would have to become sufficiently fluent in Italian to be able to pass this test. There are no classes that you have to take, so there are no mandatory classes, only the test. But, for somebody who is an English speaker, it can be difficult to learn Italian and to pass this test. Of course, it may be easier for those people who are married to an Italian citizen who was born in Italy, because maybe they speak Italian or they learn Italian while speaking to each other. Maybe they lived in Italy. So for those people, it may make sense to apply for citizenship through marriage, because it may be easier to learn the language. But still, even in these cases, I would always advise my clients to apply for citizenship by descent if they meet the requirements.
So then what are maybe some of the major differences between the processes? I mean, you mentioned already that there's the lack of language requirement for citizenship by descent, but maybe what are some of the other noticeable major differences between the two?
Let me start with the nature of the process, which is radically different. So if you're applying for citizenship by descent, you are applying to enforce your birthright. So you were born with Italian citizenship, and now you're just going through a process to have the Italian government recognize that you were born with Italian citizenship. Whereas if you apply for citizenship through marriage, you are in fact applying for naturalization. So you will become an Italian citizen since the date of the marriage. Ultimately, it doesn't make any difference because the end result is the same. You become an Italian citizen and you get an Italian passport. But, the nature of the process, the way in which you become an Italian citizen is, from a legal standpoint, radically different. On one end, you become an Italian citizen since the day of your birth. On the other hand, you become a citizen since the day in which you got married. But other than the nature, there are, of course, other major differences between the two processes, which lead me to believe that applying for citizenship by descent is always the better choice when you have both options. For starters, the length of the process is different. When you apply for citizenship by descent, you submit the application through your local Italian consulate and you wait months for your application to be processed. When you apply for citizenship through marriage, you submit the application through the website of the Ministry of Interior. In fact, the entity that processes the application is different. In one case is the Italian consulate for citizenship by descent. In the other case, it is the Ministry of Interior in Rome. So the application is submitted electronically, but is actually processed in Rome. And because there is only one office in Rome that processes applications submitted from people that live across the world, it takes longer, and the law sets a maximum processing time, which is 2 years, which can be extended to a maximum of 3 years. So potentially it could take 3 years for your application for citizenship through marriage to be processed. And I have to say, according to my experience, it does normally take the whole 3 years for the Italian government, which is knowingly slow to process applications for citizenship through marriage. So not only the process is longer when you apply for citizenship through marriage, but also in the case that your spouse doesn't have Italian citizenship yet, because he or she is in the process of applying for citizenship by descent, you have to wait for your spouse to complete the process. So your spouse needs to first become an Italian citizen by descent through the consulate, which can take a number of months, and then you can start the process for citizenship through marriage. So it is clear that if you qualify for citizenship by descent like your spouse, it is worthwhile for the both of you to go through the process for citizenship by descent, to initiate that process at the same time.
Interesting. So actually, maybe just to take it like a couple steps back to something that you mentioned before, was the date that you actually become a citizen of Italy. One being the date that you were born, one being the date that you were married. I'm just curious, though. I mean, this would be highly unlikely, but definitely possible in some cases, that maybe a person might have their citizenship taken away. I'm assuming with citizenship by descent, there's no way of taking that back. But is that also the case with citizenship through marriage?
This is an interesting question. So when you apply for citizenship by descent, you become an Italian citizen at the end of the process. That's it. When you apply for citizenship through marriage, you have to be married for the entire duration of the process. And like I said, this process can take a number of years. So if you happen to get divorced, or if your spouse dies, for example, you wouldn't be able to complete that process. Whereas if you applied for citizenship by descent, that would be like, those circumstances would be irrelevant. But if you're applying for citizenship through marriage, you have to continue being married for the whole duration of the process. And at the very end of the process, so after the 3 years, your spouse needs to go with you to an appointment where you sign documents and you ultimately take the oath of allegiance to the Italian state.
And is there anything that has to be proven after that date for the marriage, or is it theoretically that if the marriage is rocky, that a divorce could happen shortly after?
You just have to be married and not legally separated at the time when you take the oath. Whatever happens afterwards doesn't matter anymore.
That's up to you. That's your own business, it sounds like. But maybe are there any other points that we haven't covered so far? Because I know this is a very wide topic. Do you feel like there's something that maybe we've missed?
I believe some people are in a situation where only one of them qualifies for citizenship by descent and the other doesn't because he or she is not of Italian descent, or maybe they are of Italian descent but do not meet the requirements. And for the spouse, it is too difficult to go through the citizenship by marriage process because it's a very long process. They don't want to wait that long. They want to relocate to Italy sooner because they can't learn Italian. So there are couples that are in a situation where only one of them actually is in a position to be able to become an Italian citizen and the other one can't. So they ask me, what do? We want to relocate to the European Union, to a European country, to Italy or another European country. So they ask me, what options do we have if I become an Italian citizen by descent and my spouse can't become one? Fortunately, the spouse can apply for a residency permit for spouses of Italian citizens, and that residency permit can be obtained upon relocation in a European country, so not necessarily Italy. So whenever the couple is ready to relocate into the European Union in a European country, upon arrival, the non-Italian spouse can apply for a residency permit, which is relatively easy to get. You don't have to speak Italian. There are no specific requirements. The only requirement is that your Italian spouse needs to be there with you and residing with you in a European country. So it's not possible for you to get this residency permit if your Italian spouse, for example, remained in America. But yeah, the only requirement after you get this residency permit is, once again, that you remained married and not legally separated or divorced to your Italian spouse. Otherwise, you could lose your ability to maintain this residency permit. After a number of years, that becomes irrelevant, but at least for the first few years, you have to remain married in order to be able to maintain this benefit.
And maybe this is going in a bit of a different direction here, but I'm sure there will be some people wondering about, like, what if it's a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whatever, somebody that they are in a long-term relationship with, and maybe they don't want to get married. Maybe that's not even in the cards for them. They've already been married before. They don't want to go through that again. I know some European countries do have a system in place for people who are cohabitating together to be able to continue doing that. Does Italy have anything like that?
Unfortunately, if you're not married in Italy, you can't get a residency permit for spouses. So what you have to do is you have to look for another visa, like a normal visa, a
work visa or something like that, or student
visa. Yes, exactly.
So there's nothing there that could really save that situation other than good old-fashioned getting hitched. And I know in regards to citizenship by marriage, there can be a difference that comes into play if you have children or if you don't have children. What is that benefit that may come to some people who actually do have children and are married?
Normally, the children become Italian citizens along with the parent who is of Italian descent and qualifies for citizenship by descent. So they are included, if they're minors, in that parent's application for citizenship by descent, and that's how they become Italian citizens. But yeah, if you have children for the spouse who is not applying for citizenship by descent, that can help the non-Italian spouse to become an Italian citizenship through marriage sooner, because under Italian law, you have to have been married for 3 years before you're able to apply for citizenship through marriage. And make no mistake, the 3 years you start counting from the date of the marriage, not from the date in which your husband or wife became an Italian citizen by descent. But if you have minor children, that wait time is cut into half. So you have to wait only 1.5 years from the marriage before being able to file the application for citizenship through marriage. And of course, if the couple is residing in Italy, the terms are even different, because you have to wait 2 years from the marriage or 1 year if you have minor children before being able to apply for citizenship through marriage.
And that's I think a really important point to keep in mind for many people. Like, are you going to want to live in Italy anyway? And is that part of your plan? Because if it's part of your plan, maybe then it might make sense if that other spouse isn't eligible for citizenship by descent. But I'm just curious also, because we're on this topic of comparing the two, that theoretically the citizenship by marriage, you may need fewer documents. But I know you're very much of the opinion, and I would also agree with you, that citizenship by descent just is much better. But maybe that what is the real major benefit that the person actually gets? Is it actually worth it in the end to go through citizenship by descent versus citizenship through marriage?
The documents required are generally, but not always, fewer if you are applying for citizenship through marriage. So there may be more work involved if you are planning on applying for citizenship by descent. But again, not necessarily, because, for example, people who apply for citizenship by descent through a parent or grandparent, they have to collect fewer documents than those people who apply for citizenship by descent through a great-grandparent or great-great-grandparent. But on the other hand, when you apply for citizenship through marriage, while normally you need fewer documents than the documents required for citizenship by descent, it may not be the case if you have resided in a high number of states and countries, because we talked about this in other videos. When you apply for citizenship through marriage, you primarily need criminal background checks from every state or country where you have resided since your birth. And these criminal background checks normally need to be under your maiden name and married name. Also, they will need to cover other names that you potentially used throughout your life. So, for instance, if you are someone who changed the name with the marriage, and maybe you were married multiple times and you changed your name and last name all of those times, and maybe you even just changed your name because you didn't like it, so through a court order when you were very young, and then you lived in Japan and Africa and maybe 7 different US states, in that case, your application would require a high number of documents. So it may be easier to just apply for citizenship by descent if you qualify for citizenship by descent. But as for your other question, I think it also gives you more stability when you are in the process of applying for citizenship by descent, because those rules are set in stone, so they will never change. And even if they changed, you are already an Italian citizen since the moment of your birth, so a potential extremely unlikely change would affect only people born after the law changed. But for citizenship through marriage, it is not unlikely, and we saw that happening in the past years, that those rules change. For example, prior to 2018, it wasn't required to be fluent in Italian. It wasn't even required to speak Italian to apply for citizenship through marriage. And then they keep changing the processing times. Of course, other changes are unlikely going forward, but you never know. They may introduce other requirements for citizenship through marriage, which they can't introduce for citizenship by descent, because like I said,
it's
rule
set in stone. It is what it is.
and plus the rule that says that you became an Italian citizen is a law that was in effect at the time of your birth. So it can be changed retroactively. So if you are in the process of starting the citizenship through marriage process, you may face changes in the law, which cannot happen in the case of citizenship by descent.
And something, just because it is related to the subject of marriage, of course, very directly so, we've talked about marriages prior to 1983. Do you want to just quickly touch on that?
That's an interesting point. So far, we talked in general about citizenship through marriage, but there is a number of people that falls into a subcategory. So those people who were married before 1983, but only if you are a woman who married a man. What happens is that the law prior to 1983 was discriminatory against women. So if you're a woman who married somebody who was already an Italian or is of Italian descent and has the right to become an Italian citizen by descent, well, you became an Italian citizenship through marriage automatically, which makes the process for you extremely easy. So you don't have to speak Italian. You go through a much simpler process. So if somebody is a woman and was married prior to 1983 and maybe also qualifies for citizenship by descent, well, for that woman, it may make sense to actually go through the process for citizenship through marriage, because it's very simple. It doesn't require the knowledge of the Italian language. You can do it through the consulate, so there is no Ministry of Interior involved, nothing. The consulate will process your application, so the same entity which will process your husband's application for citizenship by descent. So if you are in this situation, it may be worthwhile to probably consider the citizenship through marriage.
So theoretically, just in that case where this would be the case where the woman automatically became a citizen, really that should be a faster, well, relatively speaking, in Italian terms here, a faster process.
Yes.
Well, that's fascinating. And again, I think this is really a wonderful topic to cover, because there are so many people that are eligible for both. And this, I'm sure, is going to make the difference for those people who are weighing out the differences between the two, to be able to go in and really, really look at it more to see what is right for them. Because I'm sure in some cases there may be one path that feels more right to an individual, and maybe one path that feels a little bit more correct to the other. So thank you again, Marco, for making yourself available to talk about Italian citizenship. And of course, if anybody is seeking assistance with this process, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
The easiest way is to send a message through our website, or people can give us a call. The number is on our website.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much again, Marco. And of course, thank you to all of you who've joined us for this episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. Of course, we've been here with Marco Permunian. I'm Raffaele Di Furia. And of course, for more content about life in Italy, living in Italy, and Italian dual citizenship, living as an Italian dual citizen, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Raffaele Di Furia, where I talk a lot more about these topics and get into what it is to live here in Italy, what that is like. So of course, thank you so much for joining us again. We have been here again with Marco Permunian, the head of the U.S. office of Italian Citizenship Assistance.com. I'm Raffaele Di Furia, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.